Janusz Michallik, jak się czujesz?
Bardzo dobrze, jak ty, Karolina?
Dobrze, dziękuję. Welcome to our show, Kicked Back, presented by Betway. And for all of our English listeners, I just had to ask Janusz Michallik today, who's our guest from ESPN, how he's doing, how he's feeling in Polish, because we're both from Poland, or my family's from Poland, Janusz is from Poland. We have to give a shout out to the homeland. So, Janusz, dziękuję ci bardzo. Thank you very much. We know that you're a very busy man. Champions League, Premier League, Valentine's Day, so much going on today. So, thank you for being on our show.
Oh, my pleasure.
So what's going on with you right now? What's your day look like? Champions League coverage? Anything crazy?
Yeah, I mean, it's just Champions League. Obviously the weekends are really busy. When it comes to Champions League, I mean, this week, today and tomorrow, I'm not doing the games. I'm working Thursday to summarize some of the Champions League and Europa League. I think the Barcelona against Manchester United game. So it depends on the week. Next week I'll probably be working on on the day of the Champions League. So it's normal. I also will do some stuff for Polish television as well, remotely, obviously, about all that stuff. So the weeks are pretty similar. Premier League is my major league that I cover, but obviously I talk about La Liga, or Bundesliga, or Serie A, even though we don't have the rights anymore, but I miss it because we've had it for 20 plus years, and it seems like it was my baby to a degree. But so I keep an eye, of course, on what's happening there as well.
What's your favorite team in Serie A? So I know if we're going to be friends on this show.
Oh, it's Milan.
Yeah.
It's always been I mean, it's been for a while, but I mean, obviously I haven't played against them, although I've played against some other teams. But yeah, Rigosaki Milan, I had the chance to play against them. That was a special team, so it sticks with you. Although, I mean, I think, I don't know if we all, but most people sort of have their main team that they support.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually from where they are. But I think to make it fun, you always have a team in every league that you sort of prefer or you like. So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm a devoted Milan fan, although I watch, I think, every game, but obviously not the same as if I were Italian and lived in Milan and that was my team.
Janusz, we're going to get into predictions in Champions League here in a little bit, because I want to get into kind of how your career started. But just so I have a peace of mind, who do you have winning today, AC Milan or Tottenham?
I was thinking about it because I think I'm going to have to talk about it. Both teams are struggling a little bit, right? I mean, I actually wouldn't be surprised if Milan gets something out of it. I mean, finally won a game, but Spurs, Bentancur, Sessegnon, number of Hugo Lloris and number of players are injured, key players, and Pierre-Emerick Højbjerg, who's very, very important, is suspended. So when you look at that center of the pitch, I mean, there's talk about Eric Dyer playing in the center of the midfield as well. So I think I worry about Spurs. Antonio Conte obviously coming back, to Italy, but I don't know. I have a feeling that it'll be Milan, a draw at the very least. I mean, it'd be a massive surprise if Spurs win that.
I felt the same way when I saw that AC Milan drew Tottenham. I said it's not the worst thing for AC Milan, but then we went into this stretch where I believe they conceded 13 goals in 4 games and only scored 2. And I was like, what's going on? And obviously we know the situation with Maignan, but it's been a kind of a stressful time for AC Milan fans. We went through that 11-year period without winning anything, finally won our Scudetto, and now we expect this team to continuously keep going. But I think this year's also different in the sense where these footballers, these players, are dealing with club football, Champions League football. Some of them went to the World Cup, and now it's a new year and it's the same thing. So we'll see what Champions League is like here today. It's a completely different tournament. You know what it's like as a player, club's one thing, but now you're in the Champions League. It's a different type of environment. It's a different kind of tournament. So I'm so excited. And hopefully as an AC Milan fan today, I'm crying tears of joy because it would be a nice win.
Yeah, no, it would be. I mean, when you talk about Milan, I think you have to take the good with the bad, and the good being last season, because it was an overachievement. No questions about that. And this year, I think we're kind of seeing, because this Milan team, in my opinion, is randomly put together. I just don't see a rhyme or reason and the sort of players that you could understand that either it's a longer term project or it's for now. It's sort of in between type of thing. I mean, I don't even want to talk about the fact that the players that are there now are nowhere near to what it was once, because I mean, it's just different times. But again, I think it's just a random random team. Just a lot of good players, but as a team, I don't see a direction or clear identity that Milan show. But having said that, again, they'll have an opportunity today, because both teams are struggling a little bit. But I think with Spurs, there's a lot of pressure on them, and this is, well, let's put it this way: a great opportunity for Milan to actually get a win going back to London.
I love to hear that. In terms of no identity and no clear direction with where they're going, for some reason, when you say that, the first team that pops into my mind is Chelsea right now. And I know I'm kind of throwing you into the Premier League,
Mhm.
but quickly, what are your thoughts on Chelsea? Is Graham Potter the problem? Does Potter need more time? Should Chelsea have never fired Tuchel? And or is this a team that has all of this superstar power? Enzo Fernandez was one of my favorite players from the World Cup, among others, João Felix. I don't necessarily think João Felix is the answer to their problems, but is it more so of they need more time with Potter, or this is just a club that is lacking that identity right now?
Yeah, let me put it differently. I think this team has a clear direction. I mean, I
Okay.
think it's very clear. I mean, identity you have to work on, but when you get 17 players in, and I don't even know how many in January, that's going to take time. But the clear identity is simple. I mean, this is a team that went through Armageddon. I mean, you couldn't think of the you couldn't think of a scenario, even if you try. If you were to say that Chelsea's going to falter one day and badly, you'd come up with so many different ideas than what happened to them, and the war in Ukraine and Russia, Abramovich, and
Mhm.
all of a sudden this team's for sale. This is a team that was I don't want to say bankrupt, but remember, I mean, they had to take buses and suspended and all of that stuff. So I mean, that's unfortunate. Now, I mean, the whole thing was the right thing to do, but when you just concentrate on football and forget about being just self-righteous for these players and for the fans, I mean, it's just crazy what happened, right? They went from an owner who was all about winning and winning now, who had a lot of money and was willing to spend it and lose it, because he was losing money. No questions
Mhm.
about that. I mean, he was putting money every time he needed a player. It didn't matter how much it cost. If it was an experienced player and a winner, he'd get him. It wasn't great for the books, I suppose, but he didn't care because he had that money and he had that money to lose. And so all of a sudden, new owner comes in, an American who either is trying to make everybody forget about Roman Abramovich and his way of doing things, or just thinks differently, saying this is going to be a team that may be winning trophies differently and in the future. And it's certainly, buying a very young players. In
Mhm.
the last Premier League game, I think they had 7 starters under the age of 24, which is very unusual from the older ways of that I was just mentioning. So I think, as you see it here, he's willing to throw money at it. And from everything I understand, from what we read from our sources, is that Graham Potter is the man. It doesn't matter what the results are going to be, and he's going to want to have him not just next season, but for the seasons to come. Now, I believe that, but I also know the reality of things is such that you can say all you want about how much you trust and like and want Graham Potter, but there comes a point if you don't see that
Mhm.
development, and I don't know when that's going to happen. Of course, Graham Potter won't be the man. I believe, and I said it earlier already, that he's going to be here for the rest of the season. But I do think that Chelsea has to finish season strong, just to show that even with so many chances, that there is some identity. Because right now, direction is there, but the identity is missing.
So that's the thing, Graham Potter, I believe the stat was that he'd won 2 out of 13 games recently, and I believe Chelsea most recently played West Ham United, where they ended up drawing that game. So it comes to this conversation now where fans are like, bring Tuchel back, but at some point fans weren't happy with Tuchel because they said he played too defensively. Then you bring up Potter, who's highly revered by a lot of very good managers right now. You've heard Klopp say really good things, Pep say really good things. So yeah, I'm not sure at this point in time, like what should be happening with Potter, but you would have to assume at some point if Chelsea's not finding a way to win, and I'm not even saying against Arsenal or City, like against a West Ham United with the players that they had on the field. And I don't believe in sacking coaches right away. I do think that managers need some time, but I am curious if Potter is the guy for Chelsea. Maybe that's the right way to put how I'm feeling. Ten Hag has proven that he's the right guy for United, and I know he's had more time with United than Potter's had with Chelsea. But I think with the players that Potter has and Todd Bowley supporting his every move, you think that they would at least start piecing together a team that is putting together results at this point in time. The fan base seems worried. The fan base now is like, bring Tuchel back.
Well, I mean, they're not used to it, first and foremost, and that's why they're worried. But a couple of things with Thomas Tuchel. You have to you have to remember it was more about the players. Players did not enjoy playing for a lot of players did not enjoy playing for Tuchel, right? Because we know how he is, and many of them have said playing next to him on the sideline, they just didn't enjoy it because of the way he goes about things. So I think that was the move. That's why that move happened. It wasn't because Thomas Tuchel wasn't a good manager, because he's proven already that he is. So I don't think, even with younger players, I don't think that Thomas Tuchel will be even considered by Chelsea and Todd Bowley. That's just my opinion. So that's one thing. In terms of winning things, I think, and this is just my guess, but I think, having been in situations like this, similar, obviously not at that level, but I think they've written this season off. I mean, to a degree, you could say Liverpool has as well. Although, yes, there was a big win. When I say written off, maybe the Premier League. Obviously, they'll give it a push, and if you go on a run, anything's possible. But I think there's a full understanding. And maybe it had to be explained to Todd Bowley, because we read, we've heard about it, that he thought he'd be in the Champions League every year. That's just automatic, but it is. But I think at the end of the day, looking at their position, looking what they've done, everybody there understands that getting to Champions League is going to be impossible. So having said that, I think Graham Potter's going to get that time. I think it's difficult now, because the Champions League's still there, and for as long as this is going to be interesting what happens tomorrow, because I think that team, Chelsea, Graham Potter, and the whole organization understands that anything's possible. Those are 2 games against a very good Borussia Dortmund team, who overnight kind of changed things around a little bit for themselves. But it's an opportunity, and it's late in the stage where it's possible. But when it comes to the Premier League and getting this team together, I mean, it's hard. I mean, there's no time to train. You just introduce, how many players that, they're just learning about each other, right? I mean, they know their names, I suppose, but it's not that easy when you play every 2 or 3 days, and you have to integrate all these players, and you basically have no training sessions, right? Because after the game, it's kind of nice and easy, and then the day before another game comes. So I think that's difficult. That's why I think that. And again, I'll repeat that. I think some sort of progress, even if it's small, 1 or 2 or 3 good wins in a decent style, where fans can say, wow, that was pretty nice. Young players showing this, are needed for the rest of the season to sort of give that confidence to the team, to Graham Potter, but most importantly to Todd Bowley, who's probably looking for that, for the little things, to see that this longer term project needs to be with Graham Potter.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And you even know from a player's perspective, Janusz, what momentum can do for you. And I agree with you. Liverpool's not winning the Premier League this season. Last year they were headlining for the quadruple. This year they're mid in the table. But that win against Everton, even though it was Everton, who possibly could be facing relegation, could give them momentum to have a good game against Newcastle, hopefully a win. And then they're playing against Real Madrid in the Champions League. And maybe that's an opportunity for Liverpool to kind of get that momentum going and gain that confidence in their team. with very talented players, Gakpo, Nunes, Salah, Gakpo and Salah getting big monkeys off of their back against Everton. So momentum's everything and it can carry you. So it would be nice to see that for Chelsea and their fans. And I'm very curious to see what Todd Bowley does with Chelsea. I know the perspective sometimes with these Americans coming in and, Todd Bowley even talking about how he wants an all-star game. It wasn't well received, but it's for me as someone who played here in North America, seeing like example Leeds United, all of these American footballers, these American players going and playing there and doing well. And I know, their manager got fired, but it's nice to see the integration and maybe that pipeline now for all of these North American players to start getting into the best league in the world, which is the Premier League. So I wish Chelsea success. I do think it's going to take time, but sometimes I do think like, when they have all these really talented players, that identity is maybe missing right now, but it'll take time to reach.
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes you have to change things, and the sooner you see it, the better it is, right? I mean, because sometimes you can be late to it. I think you could say that maybe about Arsenal in the past, Manchester United to a degree. Look how long these clubs have been out of, major trophies, really for the most part by their lofty standards. So Liverpool is another one. I mean, we all know changes need to happen. It is similar to Chelsea, and it isn't. It isn't because, look, both teams had unbelievable amount of injuries. For Chelsea, though, they were able to reload, even though with the young players, but they've got some bodies in. Whereas Liverpool had so many key players out, and Cody Gakpo was the only player that came in. Now they are getting some players back, as we saw. Bobby Firmino came back. Diogo Jota came back, although Diogo looked like he was out for 4 months. So that's going to take a little bit of time as well. Van Dijk is on the bench, and perhaps there's going to be another player or two eventually coming back as well. But yes, there's talent. If they were all available, I think you'd see Liverpool in a better position. I still don't know if they'd be in a position. I mean, they wouldn't be in a position to win it, but maybe closer to top four. Simply because you could see that cycle, there's a little bit of a malaise there, and Jurgen Klopp has to find a way. That's on him. That's you can easily say about players, but they've done. We see this with everybody. It eventually is just difficult to inspire players, or players be inspired every game, especially with the style of play that Jurgen Klopp demands from every player every game. That is not easy, but it's going to be very interesting what Liverpool do in the summer. I believe this is a critical summer for Liverpool, because if they don't do the right things, then you're going to see Liverpool really entering another season, maybe 2 or 3, where they may lose players, key players, because they will want to be in the big competitions, and you're hoping, if you Liverpool fan, that it's not going to be the Arsenal, Manchester United, or Chelsea. Well, I don't know if I'd speak about Chelsea yet, because they're just entering that, right? So yeah, critical summer for Liverpool.
My dad, my tatush, he's the biggest Liverpool fan. So I feel like right now I have to say, you never walk alone. He's been going through it a little bit this season. And of course, me being an AC Milan fan, we're always just going back and forth, because we never forget that one Champions League final. And that's forever. Yeah. But that one where AC Milan was, I believe, was it 2005, where Milan was leading at halftime? Oh my goodness!
I was at that game. I was at that game for ESPN when Dudek was making that crazy save. By the way, you have to be careful. Yeah, but everybody knows that I have a very soft spot for Liverpool. But yeah, then of course they lost. It was another final year after, and Milan won that one. But yeah, look, I mean, those are the days where Milan were dominant. Liverpool maybe not as much, but it was obviously a great season, great comeback. I mean, absolutely incredible. Gerrard, but I think we all know that. So yeah, I mean, Liverpool will want to reclaim that. So is Milan. Those are two marquee names, two of the biggest clubs in history of football.
You bring up Jerzy Dudek. That makes me want to go all the way back to Poland. Janusz, we appreciate your valuable insight and your knowledge. So thank you so much. But I need to ask you, you grew up, come on, you're legendary. So you grew up in Poland.
I'll do this with you every day.
Perfect. Listen, same time, same show. We'll have you every single day. But
Wonderful.
for me, it's super interesting because you were born in Poland, grew up in Poland. Your dad,
Mhm.
I'm just going to assume, is probably an instrumental person in your life who probably inspired the football in your life.
Yeah.
And you played on that junior team. So what was that like for you?
Well, I mean, obviously, when you're in a house, when you have a professional, soccer player, you go towards that, I suppose. Especially back then. I mean, football in Poland is everything, right? I mean, there are other sports that are very successful as well, but like just about everywhere else in the world, that's number one sport. And in those days growing up, obviously, we had some great teams and great club teams who were in
Mhm.
Europe, and my dad played European Cups as well. So, yeah, of course. I mean, I grew up watching him play in the same club, and when you go through the ranks and you're the ball boy, when your dad's playing against the likes of back then Bologna, Feyenoord, PSV Eindhoven in European Cups, that leaves a mark. So no doubt about that.
So then you moved to the US, and since you never played for the senior team in Poland, that unlocked the potential for you to play for
Correct.
the American team. What was that transition like for you? Because you've had a successful career with the US.
Well, I mean, it was surprising because it wasn't something that I was thinking about or
Mhm.
actively going after. So I think that was the beauty of that career,
It
of my
is.
career, and just kind of for everybody out there, you just don't know these things, right? I mean, life is life, as I say sometimes. Because I didn't. I came here. My dad was already here. I ended up playing indoor soccer because that's all there was back then. I didn't even think of. Well, I mean, I thought, my goodness, I hope there's a worthwhile league that I can play outdoors. Uh, Never really thought about the U.S. national team back then. They were in 1990, the World Cup in Italy, and I came in right after that. But I mean, I just barely made it. I just got my U.S. passport, and I wasn't. I did it. I don't want to say the right way, but the normal way
Mhm.
back when, where I had to be a permanent resident for 5 years because before I could even think about becoming
Mhm.
uh, a citizen. So timing was right. I was doing it as a private citizen, not to play for somebody. We know these days that sometimes you can get that passport a little bit quicker if the federation goes for it. That wasn't the case back then. Certainly not. Because the popularity of soccer wasn't as high, and I don't know if it would have been that easy. But to make it a long story short, I it just happened. It really did, and a lot of went into it. One of the Polish coaches that coached here, Jan Kowalski, became an interim coach for about 3 or 4 months, and he put my name in it when Bora Milutinovic asked for a list of, I don't know, 100 players, whatever it was, and I got called into this large
Wow.
camp. I don't know what it was. So a lot of luck for sure, a little bit of coincidence, and that's how it went. And so you never know where the chance is going to come from and when.
I say that's destiny. You were supposed to be
It,
a footballer.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it could have been. Yeah, it could have been. Really, no thought or on my part in terms of, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to play for the U.S. team,
Mhm.
and those are the steps, and I'm going to take them. That wasn't the case.
Well, they say that's when all the amazing things happen, when you kind of release the outcome and you're just doing what you're doing and life
Right.
hands you everything that you're supposed to be destined to experience. So that is so cool. And obviously, like the transition that you made from Poland to the US, that's not an easy thing to do on a personal side of things and
Mhm.
then of course in sport. So congratulations to you, Janusz. And
Thank you,
I
young
just
lady.
thank you. Of course. I want to ask you though, with your experience with the U.S. program and someone who's played for the American team, what are your thoughts now of seeing what the U.S. team did in Qatar at that World Cup? Because I know a lot of people didn't give the U.S. almost enough credit. Everyone almost assumed that they wouldn't have gotten out of that World Cup group, at least outside of the US. So, what are your thoughts on all of this talent that's on that squad? Because honestly, it blew me away. Tyler Adams was one of my favorite players to watch at the World Cup, and he's so solid. And you see him even for Leeds United. So, what's the
Mhm.
potential look like for this US team? And especially in 2026, Canada, USA, Mexico, it's such a massive opportunity to open that door for soccer and football to be the biggest sport in North America.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, I was
Mhm.
one of those, I mean, doubters, not necessarily coming out of the group, but I mean, the style of play. I mean, I was in
Mhm.
Qatar. I did commentate all U.S. games amongst other games as well. Um, look, I mean, I remember after the World Cup in Brazil when, in the last game against Belgium, Timmy Howard had to make, I don't know, 16,
Yep.
17 saves, basically stood on his head. We were so very, very defensive against, the golden generation of Belgians. But again, the whole tournament and, for as long as I can remember, um, it was a pretty defensive style. We weren't the sort of team that would stand up to teams, and there were exceptions. I think our team, 1994, would try to play and did play. I think the 2002 team in the World Cup in South Korea and Japan was a very good team that was playing football. But
Mhm.
but as of late, not missing the World Cup, the previous World Cup, and just the style of play. Well, wasn't what I think people are used to. American public is used to it, right? In all the sports, you want to go out there, you want to show you the best. You don't want to be there just defending. So,
Mhm.
so going into that, I wasn't sure if that's going to happen, and I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, in every game, U.S. outpossessed teams. Even in that game against Holland, although I think Van Gaal kind of made a good tactical decision and
Yes.
allowed U.S. to have the ball a little bit, but still possessing the ball against all the teams that they've played in such way was very good. That's progress. That's an incredible progress, and that's something that I think we all wanted. And now, as you said, it's a question of how do you build on that. The answer is assuming that there's going to be a change in a manager. That's
Mhm.
going to be a very, very important choice because it's going to be someone that knows how to develop young players, because that's the next step, isn't it? I mean, US
Mhm.
showed in Qatar that they can play. Also, we know that we had an issue with a number nine, or lack of the number nine,
Yep.
of that central striker. I think the players are out there, and maybe the players that were in Qatar, maybe there is a manager that can take that next step. And obviously there is a great experience. I mean, this team was second youngest, and probably would have been the youngest if it wasn't for Timmy Ream, who had a
Yep.
great World Cup, was a late addition. What's he, 35 or 36? So that average went up just a little bit, but it was a very young team, and still there's so many young players that didn't go to the World Cup but are applying their trade in either MLS or in Europe with some good
Mhm.
clubs. So I think the future is bright. What does that mean? Again, I'm not sure. I think the foundation is there because now tactically, this U.S. team was pretty good. Technically, as we've seen, a very good, great engine. As you've said, rightfully so, with Tyler Adams, McKennie, Yunus Musa, and there's a number of players.
Musa. Yep.
Kellen Acosta, and there's going to be other players coming in. Brendan Aronson, who maybe didn't play as much as he wanted. Claudio Reyna, with all the issues we've had, we know how talented he is. He's showing that now in the Bundesliga, and we'll maybe even see it
Yep.
tomorrow against Chelsea, because he's been very, very good now that he's healthy and set some time. So it's good, but what's not great, obviously, is that you don't qualify. It's good news that U.S. is going to be involved in the Copa America, so that's going to help. Some of these
Yes.
tournaments would allow these players to play meaningful games against very good competition. And as I've said, we'll just wait and see in terms of a coach who that's going to be, because it's always a critical decision, but I think it needs to be someone that's very good in developing not just young players, but maybe taking a step in terms of attacking, and
Yes.
how to do it, how to take that next step. So it's not just possession, but it kind of ends with number of chances and goals being scored.
Rumor here was that Zinedine Zidane had an opportunity to be the head coach of the US team. And when I heard that, I was
Mm.
like, oh my goodness, please let it happen. But of course, it didn't end up panning out that way. Who would you like to see coach the US team?
I've been asked this. I don't know right now. It really, I mean, I think Alexi Lalas, I mean, I've thought of him, but I just heard him recently, mention Luis Enrique, which would be a pretty decent choice if you
Mhm.
wanted to. I think, as you all know, and your listeners probably know as well, right now there's a vacancy in the director of coaching, or the general manager, whatever you want to call it, because, Ernie Stewart went back to Holland. Also, Brian McBride, who was helping in that process,
Yep.
is also no longer there. So obviously they need to find that person first, because that's the person that needs to pick and be responsible for who he picks. So I do agree that there's a little bit of time right now, but I also think and hope, and maybe I'm not on the same page as some that are saying take your time. I would like to see a manager sooner rather, or I should say that I would like to see a coach, and obviously
Okay.
a person that's going to pick him sooner rather than later, but definitely before the summer, because as you know, Canada, we're going to have the Nations League and Gold Cup,
Hmm.
and those are two tournaments that a new coming coach could actually see the players and the pool
Absolutely.
of players in two tournaments that are meaningful.
Absolutely. No, I'm so excited about the US. Of course, I'm excited about Canada as someone who lives in Canada, but the US, like you said, they lack that number 9 or even just a player during the World Cup who could take that quality shot on target and get them that goal. But I think that if they're able to add that, even that game against England, I was so impressed with the US, and I said that was almost that one component of the game that they were missing, that if they had, that they would have walked away from that game with a win. So I'm so excited to
Yeah,
see,
by the way, that I looked at it. I remember, calling the game, and I felt it. Sometimes you rewatch a game as well, because calling a live game, sometimes there are nuances that escape you. But I don't know if the U.S. is that far. I just think it takes confidence and a little bit of composure,
yeah.
because that's what was missing. It's not. I mean, it's easy to say that they were missing the number 9, but what does that mean? It's not like U.S. is going to come up with Karim Benzema, Lewandowski, or Harry Kane, who are automatic in these positions. But I think it's maybe lack of experience. That
100%.
final pass was always an issue, and so it's a little bit a confidence and composure. And sometimes managers can take the existing players and create an environment where they're successful. So the same players could have had different outcomes in that, but for whatever reason maybe they just weren't ready for it just yet. It could be that.
I completely agree. And again, I mean, I didn't play at your level, but I played on the junior team here in Canada and went to a junior World Cup. But experience is huge for any athlete in any sport. And I say that about Canada because a lot of people say, oh, Canada didn't even get a point. And I remind them that not a single player on that team had ever been to a World Cup. So now when you head into 2026, there's such a large opportunity to build on that experience. And they have to, because now they've laid that foundation down of getting that experience, and they have the talent, they have the players. Alphonso Davies is one of the best left backs in the world. Estacio, he was doing so well in the Champions League right before the World Cup. Megged Kevin De Bruyne in the game against Belgium. So that foundation of experience, I think, is huge because it gives you the confidence to do things that you see some of the top footballers in the world doing. So I agree to that statement with the US, and that's why I'm just so excited about what the sport here in North America looks like going forward.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity for Canada. I know them well, played against them many times. As you know, I've worked in Canada for TSN, and I think I did one game. I'm trying to remember which one was Canada. Look, I mean, the start was tremendous against Belgium. I think
Yes.
that put Canada on the map because of the quality, how relentless they were, and afterwards, even in the other games, they're not too bad. I think your manager probably regrets some of the words, because it's. I mean, this is not why they didn't win those games, but
I agree.
eventually, yeah, you need that little bit extra quality, right? I mean, after a game like this, all of a sudden everybody's kind of looking at Canada and say, wow, we didn't expect this, right? So everybody started to pay attention. You couldn't fly under the radar. So there's always a positive and a negative, because nobody expected Canada to play the way they played in that first game against Belgium. And all of a sudden, the next two opponents are like, wait a second, this is a real team. And we know Jonathan David and Kyle Larin and Tatum Buchanan. I mean, there's a certain amount of quality. I think Canada is sort of in a situation that we were, in 1994, right? So now, that World Cup in '94 was a catalyst for everything that happened, everything good that happened in the United States in terms of soccer. The continuous development of the national team, the emergence of Major League Soccer, a lot of money went into that, right? And I think the U.S. soccer is benefiting from that. For Canada, this, I think, this past World Cup was kind of, here we are. We can play this game, right? Because really, 80 or 90% of the time, or 90% of the people didn't think that, right? And now being a co-host in that one, I think it's those 4 years are super important as well because
Mhm.
it could be a catalyst for things to come in the future if the 4 years are not wasted and Canada goes from strength to strength. What I mean by that is, yes, get the points. There's a goal, so that's a good thing, right? The first goal was a
Yes,
Fonzie,
it's
right? I
huge.
think it was Fonzie. So
Yes.
at least you can get that out of the way. People don't, that narrative is out. But I think it's going to be key 4 years, and it's good. It's good for this region. I've always said that even before the World Cup. I mean, we have this banter between U.S. and Canada when we were players. I don't ever remember losing to Canada. I think we won all the games, but it was always a tough game, not one that I remember we looked forward to, right? Because it was always physical and that extra rivalry was there. But I think for the development of CONCACAF, and it's massive because
Mhm.
on one hand you could say, well, yeah, we don't need another good team because that means we're always going to be there, right? The World Cup's bigger, everybody's going to be there anyway. But I think everybody gets better when you have tougher games within the region. So
Absolutely.
it's not just about US and Mexico because that's what it used to be, and Costa Rica from time to time. Now you have Costa Rica. Now you have Canada that comes in. I mean, we can't forget that Canada did win the World Cup qualifiers, right, ahead of Mexico and United States. So I think I think that's good for the region and for the teams in that region because now you're adding another competitive
Yep.
team into it.
Perfectly said. Okay, I'm gonna ask you one last question, Janusz. My dad grew up, so I'm assuming you grew up watching the same Polish players: Kasperczak, Lubański,
Mhm.
Dana, Boniek. My
Mhm.
dad used to show me tapes of how they played, and he lives in that era of
Mhm.
Polish football. And what I've grown up with are talented players like Lewandowski and a few others, Zielinski. But there's such a disconnect with sometimes the players that you have and what we've seen in terms of quality. So what do you think this Polish national team now, who is now being run by Fernando Santos? I'm curious to see what you think about Fernando Santos being hired to manage this team. But what's this Polish team need to do to not only, get into that round of 16 in the World Cup, because they accomplished that in Qatar. It was the first
Mhm.
time in what, 37 years. But for me, it wasn't enough because I didn't think that they played well at all. There were
Mhm.
some games that I were watching that I was like, this is painful.
Right.
It's not good football. We're not utilizing the midfield. Krychowiak, no offense to Krychowiak, what's he still doing there? And again, I say that respectfully, but what does Poland need to do to actually be a team that people from my dad's generation get excited to watch today?
Well, I mean, one word comes in, and it's more complicated than that. But I would say be brave because that's
Yep.
the players are there. There's enough players to play differently, right? And I agree with you. I mean, it was a bad display for a team that came
Hmm.
out of the group. It wasn't pretty, right? So I think it's just mentality, and hopefully Fernando Santos brings that. We don't know that. We have to give him benefit of the doubt. He just got there this week. Actually, went to a couple extra classa games. Met Robert Lewandowski yesterday in Barcelona. So obviously he's getting his feet wet. But I think it's a transition. It's a little bit generational, and I would kind of compare that a little bit to the U.S. And I've talked about being kind of defensive, not playing really
Hmm.
good football, but bravery. Because I think people confuse two things sometimes. Because people say, "Well, we need to play better." What does that mean, right? I mean, you have the
True.
players that you have, and sometimes it's impossible. I mean, if I'd say I want Poland to play much better football, I don't know if that's possible. I mean, some of these players can only do so much, right? But they can't. The
It's true.
attitude can be different. You could be braver. So we're not going to
Hmm.
see, Zielinski dribbling through 3, 4, 5 players, or Szymański, or some of the younger players, because you have to come to that level. But you can be set out with a different attitude before the game, and you can still dominate games without being technically superior, right? So that bravery, different way of thinking, different way of approaching games. Ahead of this World Cup, couple players, including the coach, if I remember correctly, said, "Well, we're not going there to play good football. We're just going to get out." Well, that's good. And this is well, I get that, and I give him credit because I mean, sports are about results. But I think sports about results in a World Cup for maybe 3 or 4 or 5 countries, right? They're the only ones that have a chance to win the World Cup. Everyone else, I would argue, is look, if you're going to go to the big dance every
Uh,
4 years or every 2 years, if European championships, right? You want to show your country, you want to be remembered. And unfortunately, this Polish team is going to be remembered as one of the worst in this World Cup. I mean, I had colleagues coming up to me saying, "Why are you playing this way against Mexico or in Argentina?
oh,
Why are you not trying?" And look, they're the world champions, but in the end, I think Olympics and World Cups, European Championships, in a way, is you advertise your country, you advertise your sport, and you want to show that, look, it's been so hard to get here. Poland didn't go to the big tournaments for 16 years. So when you finally get there, try to play a little bit. So that's what I mean about the change. Be braver. And I think if you're braver, sometimes you become a better player, because some of these players, when they see that they have a chance in a game, all of a sudden maybe aren't afraid to do things that they were afraid to do before. I hope that makes sense.
it makes complete sense. I actually didn't know that the head coach said that, we're going in to not play well just to get results. Honestly, that mentality bothers me, because maybe that's something that works when you go back to your domestic clubs for an individual. But like you said, when you're at the World Cup and you have Argentina in your group, you have to go out saying this is going to be the best game we ever played, or you're going to get performances like we saw Poland give. I will say I was probably at times, in moments, maybe the most impressed with them against France, because I do feel like they tried a little bit to generate some type of attack. But again, it wasn't enough for me. And I might have been one of the only Polish fans on media, because I make my videos on TikTok, and I got a lot of angry Polish fans saying that I don't support my team. And I actually, it's the opposite. I want this team to do so well, but it's time for them to start setting the bar a little higher, especially for Lewandowski, who we are now going to see him be one of the best number nines of at least my generation. And I think that he deserves more from that international football scene, because sometimes his name, unfortunately, gets brought into a conversation of, oh, Lewandowski doesn't do anything in the World Cup or the Euro Cup for his national team, but he's able to do it for Bayern or Barcelona. And that's sometimes the arguments I face. I just sometimes don't think he's being utilized in the right way with the Polish national team. And I hope that bar and that standard is set higher for Poland. I don't know if Fernando Santos is the guy to do it, but like you said, we need to give him a chance to kind of prove himself in that Polish program. I, for one, am happy that it's not a Polish coach. It's nice that the Polish Federation went outside to bring another coach in. It's something I haven't at least seen in a long time. So we'll see what happens with Poland, but I hope their mentality gets better, because I agree with you, Janusz. They have to be braver. That's a great way of putting it.
Yeah, as I said, it's not an easy process, that's for sure. I think players will have to be responsible. I think we can't be afraid to put responsibility on Robert Lewandowski and Zielinski as well. I mean, they're the lead, they're great players. Uh, I think, I mean, I understand the argument that, playing for Napoli or playing for Barcelona or Bayern Munich previously, obviously you're surrounded by better players, which makes it easier for you. So that's a fact. You can't fight it. But that doesn't mean that it has to be an excuse, right? Great leaders find a way, and either get through their teammates or getting through the managers, or finding a way to galvanize players that are around them. So there's a certain level that I suspect a team like Poland can't go past it unless everything works perfectly. But that's also not impossible, because we saw it in was it 2016 European Championships. This was a team that was very well organized. This was a team that was lost to Portugal in penalties, even though I think they had in that game, and they weren't far away from being, say, in the final. I mean, who knows? So it's possible, but that spirit has to be there. There's a certain level that I still don't think that team, not just Poland, but teams like Poland, it's difficult to get past by. But I do believe that look, I mean, Fernando Santos obviously has won European championships. He's seen and he's worked with the best players in the world.
Yes.
So he's got that experience, and maybe there is something, because to change that mentality. He's not going to come in and find 5 players that all of a sudden we're going to say, well, where'd they come from? That's not going to happen. But I think, at that level, when you meet only so many times in a year, that's why I want this team to be braver, to sell Poland in a different way. Because, I mean, you're only going to be there, play 5, 6, 7 games a year, or 8. I don't know
Yeah.
how many. There's going to be less and less of them, obviously, right? Uh, uh, but I'm hoping that with his vast experience, playing at the highest level, winning highest trophies, and working with the best players, he's going to be able to change some of the mentality, and that goes a far
Yeah.
that goes a long way. Because I've always said, imagine, let's take this team. Imagine if just the 11 players, just the starting lineup gets better by 1%. That's not a lot to us.
Exactly. Hmm.
1%. I mean, you're talking about 11%. That's a lot. And if so that's what I'm hoping for, and I'm being very realistic in what the team can achieve. But again, results matter. It's going to matter that he gets to the European Championships in Germany. So first couple of games are going to be maybe more about a result, right?
Yeah.
Than anything else. But then, 2 teams qualified: Czech Republic, Albania, first 2 games. Poland's certainly capable of coming out of that group. And if at some point after 4 or 5 games or 4 games there, it looks like everything's going well, that's what I'm hoping, that Fernando Santos is going to start introducing some younger players into this team, so we see a different team in Germany.
Super valuable perspective. I appreciate hearing that, because when I first heard of Fernando Santos, I'm like, oh, like, I don't know. Of all the guys right now, I wasn't quite sure on him, but you're right. He's managed, some of the biggest names, the biggest players. He has that experience. Maybe that's exactly what Poland needs right now. So, Janusz Michallik, thank you very much for your time. Maybe, hopefully, Poland has this incredible Euro Cup. They qualify. They have this incredible run. We'd love to have you back on the show to talk about it. So, just right now, thank you for your time, your knowledge, your experience, your presence, everything that you gave to the show today. Dziękuję ci bardzo.
Dziękuję
And
również. Thank you.
yes, and yes, and we're rooting for you. My dad said that you come from a really nice region of Poland. He said my grandma wasn't born too far from there,
Mm.
so Polish people appreciate you. And
There you
again,
go.
like I said, we have a
Power.
Polish power. We always said that. And Janusz, before you go, one thing that I love about our community of people, Polish people, is that you may meet them for the first time randomly, and it's like they're just the nice, you feel like you've known each other forever. And I think that's one of the most special parts about being Polish in our community and our people. And again, we have a lot of listeners on Kicked Back that are Polish, so they're going to
Oh
really
boy.
enjoy, your insights, and that I got to speak with you today. So thank you very much, and hopefully we talk soon.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, and thanks for having me on.